Hello and welcome to the Storm of Scripture. I'm Jeff Johnson, and today we're going to look at the very beginning of the fifth trumpet judgment. Immediately after the fifth trumpet sounds, John sees a star that has fallen to earth. This star behaves in a way that makes it clear it is a supernatural being, an angel of some sort. Because this angel is described as fallen, many scholars and commentators assume that this is one of the bad guys. But that is not clear-cut in the text, and in fact, I favor the interpretation that says this angel is one of the good guys. Either way, this angel is given a key to the abyss. The abyss is a symbol that stretches all the way back to the first verses of Genesis. It's a Greek word that means a bottomless pit, and is also identified with the deeps of creation. We'll look at the Old Testament context that discuss a watery abyss, and also a passage from 1 Enoch, a Second Temple piece of literature that discusses a fiery abyss. The angel is given a key to the abyss, and we'll end our discussion today by looking at the importance of the key imagery. Keys have come up 3 times in the book of Revelation, and we'll talk about what a key represents. Thank you for joining me as we examine the treasures in Revelation chapter 9, verse 1. Today, we are beginning Revelation chapter 9. Every chapter in Revelation brings new images and complexities into this vision that John had. And Revelation chapter 9 is certainly no exception to this idea, because we are suddenly going to move to a new phase, even with the trumpets. The first 4 trumpets we looked at covered 4 realms of creation: the earth, the sea, the rivers, and the sky, the heavens. And each one of those realms was impacted by what the trumpet released. And here we have a 5th trumpet blowing in Revelation 9:1. Let me just read the verse. And the 5th angel blew the trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to the earth, and the key of the shaft of the abyss was given to him. Let's just look first at what the trumpet releases: a star that had fallen from heaven to the earth. The 3rd trumpet released a star that fell to earth onto the rivers, the star named Wormwood, and which turned the rivers bitter. Here we have another star. And I've already mentioned the fact that I think that the burning mountain imagery from the 2nd trumpet was also like a divine being or an angelic figure, if we take that Enoch connection. 3 of these first 5 are all an angel responding to the trumpet in some way, coming to earth. In the 2nd trumpet hitting the sea, and the 3rd trumpet hitting the rivers, and then here in the 5th trumpet. There is a significant divide amongst scholars. I can't say if it's an even divide or if it weighs one way or the other, but in any case, there is a significant percentage of scholars, biblical students, that divide over this verse. Some saying that this star is one of the good guys, and some saying that this star is one of the bad guys. Is an angel. Is this an angel of God, a faithful one of the divine host, or is this an angel of Satan? Is this a fallen angel? It's described as one. The star had fallen. Does that mean, as a fallen angel, that this is a demon, or what we might call a demon? Or is it an angel? What is this star? And as I said, scholars are divided on this point. Some will connect this star that had fallen from heaven with Satan himself, or one of Satan's minions, and they will go to Revelation chapter 12. Of course, we haven't been there yet, but we'll get there eventually. But they look at Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, where it says, "And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. This doesn't call them fallen angels with that particular phrase, but I think we can see the connection in the idea. Thrown down from heaven would certainly indicate that they were falling to the earth from heaven. The scholars who say that the angel of Revelation 9:1 is one of the bad guys will then further divide as to whether this bad guy angel is one of Satan's angels, what we might call a demon, or Satan himself. I tend to think that maybe this is one of the good guys. The only previous mention of stars falling to earth in the book of Revelation is in Revelation 6. Verses 12 and 13. It's the sixth seal from the scroll that the Lamb opens. Revelation 6, 12 and 13 reads this way. And I watched when he opened the sixth seal, and a great earthquake took place, and the sun became black like sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to earth, like a fig tree throws down its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. Now, why did these stars fall? Did these stars fall because they were rebellious and they were being kicked out of heaven? Maybe that's one person's approach. That's not my thought. As I mentioned when we talked through this couple of verses in the sixth seal, I believe all of these are omens that would have been understood by the pagan culture as God planning to do something big, probably bad, on the earth. Earthquakes were routinely understood as omens, and they were normally destructive, so they were omens of bad things that could come, even worse than the earthquake itself. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, or the moon turning to blood red moons, these were all interpreted as celestial omens of ill intent from the gods. So were meteor showers, the falling stars. These were all celestial events that were interpreted as omens from the gods. And I understand that the sixth seal is warning the pagan world that God is about to do something and they need to be paying attention, that the bad things are about to happen are indeed a divine judgment on them. And so these stars fall to earth as messengers, as harbingers of what God is going to do. In that sense, the stars of heaven falling to earth are truly angels sending a message to the people on the earth that God is about to do something important. I don't read this passage in Revelation 6:13 as meaning that these stars are evil divine beings. Most commentators overlook or don't engage with the idea that the stars would be viewed as divine beings in the first place. They're just viewed as either literally stars or as meteorites. And here, I think that they are representative of that same idea, that divine beings are giving us a message here, and we need to wake up and pay attention. So it's not the stars doing evil that causes them to be fallen to earth. What it is God communicating a message through them. Now we also see the good guy stars coming from heaven to earth in Revelation 12:4, where we read this: his tail, and that's the serpent's tail, the dragon that appears in the skies. His tail swept away a third of the stars from heaven and threw them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, in order that whenever she gave birth to her child, he could devour it. Now here, these are the good guy stars. The dragon is opposing them. He throws them down to earth. So just getting thrown from heaven to earth isn't automatically mean that you're an evil being, because here the dragon throws the good guys to the earth by his tail. Now, we're going to unpack a lot of Revelation 12 even more when we get there. Here is, in my opinion, the key verse that shows that the angel with the key given the key is a good guy. And that is that we see a similar angel in Revelation 20, verses 1 and 2. And I saw an angel descending from heaven, holding the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon, the ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So here is an angel with the same key, apparently, the same key to the same abyss in Revelation 20. Is it the same angel? I think that's a possibility. We can't know because there's no name given and no identifying. It says, and I saw the angel who had unlocked the abyss holding the key again. We don't have anything like that. Just here's an angel, but he is holding the same key to the abyss. And we don't have the key changing hands in between. So I think there's a strong case to be made that there's continuity here and that this is the same angel who has the same key and is, in this case, going to lock the dragon into the abyss, as opposed to in chapter 9, unlocking the abyss to let out its contents, which we will get to that next week. The main idea is that that abyss is getting unlocked, and there's going to be a bad consequence from it, which now begs the question, what is this abyss? If this is a key to the abyss, what is it? Abyss is a Greek word that means without depth, which basically means without a bottom. The bottomless pit is the idea of the abyss. And as I was putting this together, I realized that I need to tweak my 4 spheres of creation slide, because the abyss was considered one of the realms of creation, an opposite to the heavens, under the earth, and it was a place of the demons, of death. It was a place of judgment. All of these ideas are connected to the abyss, a dark place under the earth. The fact that it is associated with demons, we see from Jesus' own ministry in Luke chapter 8, when he is dealing with the man who is possessed by the many demons named Legion. In Luke 8, verses 30 and 31, we read, so Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, because many demons had entered into him. And they began imploring him that he would not order them to depart into the abyss. The abyss would be associated with demons, at least their judgment and punishment. As I read this and putting it in the wider context of the abyss as it's understood in the ancient world, I believe that abyss was where the demons could not be released until they were finally judged, thrown into the lake of fire, as we might say from the imagery of Revelation. So if they got into the abyss, that was their last stop before annihilation or eternal punishment, however you want to read the lake of fire. Those demons would not be free to move about and to have any effect on humanity again, and they would only suffer if they got thrown into the abyss. They would have no relief. And so they implore Jesus not to send them in there. But this does show us that the abyss is affiliated with demons. There are demons in there that have already been condemned and constrained to the abyss, and these demons don't want to be one of those. It's also associated with the dead. In Romans chapter 10, verses 6 and 7, Paul is making a point about how accessible Jesus is and how we can simply believe in him and accept the gospel, and we don't have to do anything extraordinary. And in Romans 10, 6 and 7, he says, but the righteousness from faith speaks like this, do not say in your heart, who will ascend to heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. So here the abyss is opposite of heaven. If you go up, you will reach the heavens. If you go down, you will reach the abyss. And in the abyss are the dead. And we don't need to descend into the realm of the dead to connect with Christ. For one thing, he's not there. He was a temporary occupant for 3 days. but he is not there. And he is in heaven, but we don't have to ascend to heaven because he is with us. His Spirit is always with us. We don't have to go there. But this points out, the main point of this passage is that the abyss is associated with the dead, as well as with demons. And the abyss is actually a Greek word that is used in the Septuagint in a couple of key places in the book of Genesis even. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and this is an English translation from the Septuagint Greek, not from the Masoretic Hebrew. That's why it's going to read a little differently. But the word abyss is a Greek word, so it shows up in the Greek Old Testament, in the Greek Septuagint. And so this is an English translation from the Greek. But the land was unseen and unprepared, and darkness was upon the abyss, and the Spirit of God rushed upon the water. So the abyss is that primordial water that was covering all the earth in the very beginning of chapter 1. It's translated in English from the Masoretic text as the deep, a word tahom. It is the deep that is above on the face of the earth when God begins creating. And in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, we read about Noah. In the 600th year in the life of Noah, during the second month, on the 27th of the month, on this day, all the springs of the abyss burst forth, and the waterfalls of the heaven were opened. So an interesting contrast again from the heavens, where water comes down from the heavens, and the abyss, which is where it comes up from the deep. The deep is a source of these waters. And in Scripture, in the Old Testament, the abyss is always associated with water, a watery abyss. In the New Testament, and in this passage in chapter 9, we will see that the abyss is not a watery abyss. Instead, smoke and fire, or at least smoke, the implication of fire, is associated with abyss in Revelation. So where did that come from? Well, it was an idea by the time of the New Testament that there was a watery abyss and a fiery one. And that fiery abyss is mentioned in 1 Enoch. I'm not citing 1 Enoch to say this is Scripture and we ought to believe what he says. I'm citing it because I'm showing that the idea of a fiery abyss was part of the worldview in the New Testament times when John wrote the Revelation. In 1 Enoch 10:13, he's talking about the rebellious sons of God, the ones from Genesis 6. He says, "Then they, those rebellious sons of God, will be led away to the fiery abyss, and to the torture, and to the prison, where they will be confined forever." This one verse from 1 Enoch connects the idea of fire in the abyss, not water, and also punishment, confinement, torture, just the kinds of things that the demons were begging Jesus not to send them to the abyss because of all these things. Much later in 1 Enoch, in chapter 90, verses 24 and 25, he is talking about judgment again. He says, "Judgment was exacted first on the stars, and they were judged and found to be sinners. And they went to the place of judgment, and they threw them into an abyss, and it was full of fire. And it was burning and was full of pillars of fire. And those 70 shepherds were judged and found to be sinners, and they were thrown into that fiery abyss." This is showing a judgment first on the spiritual powers that had abused their place and rebelled against God, the stars. They were judged and found to be sinners and thrown into the fire. But then also the 70 shepherds are human leaders that have been rebellious against God, have not been shepherding the flock as God would design, and they are also thrown into the abyss, in the fiery abyss. In the worldview of the first century, there was the watery abyss associated with like Noah's flood and with creation, and a fiery abyss that was a picture of ultimate judgment and the destruction of evil, or at least the punishment of evil. Well, the last point in this verse is that this star is given the key to the shaft of the abyss. It doesn't say who gave him the keys, but the key is the authority to unlock that abyss. The key is a symbol that repeats in Revelation a few times. It's not maybe a major theme, but we do get it a few times. In fact, in Revelation chapter 1, verse 18, it's mentioned. For the full context, I want to read verse 17 and 18. This is John having the vision of the glorified Christ. And then after that vision of the glorified Christ amongst the seven lampstands, then we read about this. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead person, and he placed his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, and the one who lives. And I was dead, and behold, I am living forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and of Hades. This idea of holding the keys means that he's in control. He has the power over them. They do not have power over him. He has power over them, over death and of Hades. Another key is mentioned in one of the letters to the seven churches, the Church of Philadelphia, in Revelation 3:7, in that opening phrase. He says, and to the angel in the Church of Philadelphia write, this is what the Holy One, the true one, the one who has the key of David, the one who opens and no one can shut, the one who shuts and no one can open, says. And then he continues with his message to the church, but he holds the key of David. The key image is one of authority. The key of David was the authority over God's people. As David was king over God's people in Israel, so God is key, and as Jesus is the key over God's people. He holds that authority, he holds that influence. And when he decides that there is an opportunity, that the door is open, he opens the door and no one will shut it, because he has the key. Similarly, this angel has been given the key to the shaft of the abyss. It indicates that God delegates his authority. He has delegated his authority to this angel and told that angel to use it to unlock the abyss. Or we don't read about the unlocking until the next verse. But he has the authority to keep locked or to unlock the abyss. Now he is submitting to God's design. He will unlock that abyss because it is God's design for him to do so. But he has that key because God has delegated his authority to him. And that perhaps is one of the main reasons I see this angel, this star, which is also an angel, as one of the good guys. Because God has entrusted him and delegated authority to him to have power over the abyss to unlock it. And I don't believe that God would delegate his authority to a rebellious angel. He delegates his authority to the faithful ones. Now, after he's delegated that authority, the angels may rebel, but I don't believe he delegates that authority to a rebellious being, whether human or heavenly. So he's given that key to this angel, and then we will see next week what he does with it. Thank you for joining me today as we look at Revelation chapter 9, verse 1. I'd love to hear your feedback, either here on YouTube in a comment or over on the Facebook discussion group for this channel. I look forward to our next opportunity to examine the treasures in the biblical text.